So all of the teachings and practices that we're exploring during these weeks together, they're all converging in on one point. The sequence from the loving kindness right on through, culminating to the bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta. That's all for the sake of realizing ultimate bodhicitta, which in the Dzogchen context is realizing Rigpa. Rigpa is ultimate bodhicitta, right? That non-dual realization of pristine awareness and Dharmadhatu, or absolute space of phenomena. So it's all going in that direction, to wake up. Then we have the Shamatha route, where we're starting here in the shallow end of the pool, but we're in our bodies, which is a good place to start. But as you know, we'll be going from there to settling the mind, to awareness of awareness, and that's going directly to realization of Rigpa. And then we're starting in the shallow end of the pool in this Vipashyana practice, very basic, foundational, elementary practices of closely bringing mindfulness to the body, to feelings, and so on, which will be leading to, segueing over into the Mahayana approach, like Shantideva's approach, to the 4 applications of mindfulness, which is all about realizing the empty nature, the emptiness of inherent nature of the body, feelings, and so on. And then that, of course, is leading to realizing the empty nature of your own mind, and that, of course, is right next door to realizing Rigpa. So we're converging in from three angles, but all in on the same point, all having exactly the same purpose, same point of convergence. Oh. So they would say in Tibetan, Gomba Chik, it's all converging in upon one view. So in that theme, I'd like to do now, with very little preamble, go back to the first of the 4 applications of mindfulness in this very foundational way, but drawing a bit from the Tibetan tradition. When I studied this, when I left the Buddhist school of dialectics a long time ago, it was to go off and practice the 4 applications of mindfulness. That's why I left, so I could meditate more and try to integrate the teachings that I'd received thus far. And I remember very clearly then, it was by way of Tsongkhapa, because Tsongkhapa wrote a brilliant, concise explanation of these 4 applications of mindfulness, and he made it very clear that when we're referring to the first one, the close application of mindfulness to the body, it refers, as we see in the Pali Canon, it refers to one's own body. One attends to the body internally. You might recall this, yeah? And then one attends to or closely applies mindfulness to the body externally, and that's closely attending to the body, the facial expression, body language, and so on, of others, human and non-human. And then one attends to the body internally and externally. It's really quite brilliant. And this is where one is engaging with some other sentient being, let's say a human being. But now you're attending to the whole system. As you're observing and seeing Amy, the gentle Mona Lisa smile, and now it's broken into, the sun has come out and the teeth are showing, So my words are influencing her, but then it's nice to see people smile, and that influences anybody who, receives somebody else's smile, a sign of friendliness, of good cheer. And so that was a whole system that took place there, And so there it is, and this obviously influenced my words. And so it's this internally and externally, in seeing how our physical presence with each other influences the physical presence with each other. It's very, very deep. But Tsongkhapa takes it even a step further in this regard. He broadens it. And he said, well, these 4 close applications of mindfulness, in fact, they're closely, when all is said and done, when you've finished with them, the whole set of 4, you haven't left out anything. That is, there's nothing in reality that you've excluded. This is all inclusive. So these are 4 big categories, and what is placed in the first one, the close application of mindfulness to the body, is the entire physical world. Everything physical. Planets, elementary particles, you name it. But we're doing this from a first-person perspective. We're not trying to do it simply conceptually, imagining electromagnetic fields and so forth, but applying mindfulness to the physical world as it manifests. Because, of course, I've never questioned, and I think it's silly to question, that we are physical beings, and we're living in a physical universe. That's not all there is to it, of course, but it's also silly to deny. And so we're attending to the physical by way of 5 physical senses, 5 physical senses. And so in our next practice, which we're going to get to very shortly now, is we'll come right back to this stillness. This is the common denominator. And this is the common denominator with Dzogchen practice. The texture, the cutting through to Rigpa, is that common denominator. Resting in the stillness of awareness, which unveils itself as pristine awareness. So we're going to come back to there, because we'll always come back to there. Whether practicing mindfulness or breathing, all the way through. We come back to this point of stillness, of clarity, of discernment, but rather than, in the next session, I'll talk a little bit about it and give a bit of guidance, but it won't need much when we're actually doing it, will be, while resting in the stillness and doing our best not to move out. So we hear a bird chirping, we then don't leap off the bench and then follow the sound of the bird. We hear maybe anything else, or we see something, or we feel something. We don't leap off our throne and look, oh, there's a tactile sensation, oh, there's a sound, oh, there's the visual, oh, I think I'm smelling some incense, or what have you. We're not going out. We're staying right where we are and attending to these appearances arising in the space of awareness. Because, of course, those appearances don't exist outside the space of awareness. They don't exist in physical space, and they're not physical. But now we'll add this element which makes it a bit more than simply bare attention. And it's a hypothesis. And it comes from the Sautrantika system, just in case anybody's interested. The Sautrantika system of Buddhist philosophy. And that is that for all of these appearances arising for the time being, I'm just going to talk just about the 5 physical senses. We're going to have time for the mental later. That'll be central. But right now we're covering the physical. We don't want to overlook that. So from the Sautrantika system, for these 5, sneeze coming? Yes, all the podcasters, you may thank me. I didn't just deafen you. That for all these appearances arising in the senses, actually all 6, but for right now we're on the body, which means we'll focus on 5. All these appearances have momentary existence. All of these are arising from moment to moment. They're always fresh, they're always in flux, always changing. They are subtly impermanent, and this is arising and passing from moment to moment, and that's true for all of them. Tactile sensations, sounds, the visual, the auditory, everything. Olfactory and gustatory. That they're all fresh, unprecedented, arising and passing. The whole world is just all of these appearances, these 5 domains of appearances, are all in a constant state of flux, like as if they're fizzing or effervescent or just bubbling all the time. In contrast to that, and these are what we directly perceive. These are what are given. These are the in the scene, let there just be the scene, etc. It's complete. Just actually, there's nothing to grasp onto, because by the time you've grasped onto it, it's already gone. In contrast to what reality is dishing up by way of the 5 sense doors, in contrast to these appearances that are arising, there are the conceptual projections we superimpose upon these domains. In short, words and concepts, words and ideas. And the hypothesis here, because that's the interesting way to approach this rather than just something to memorize, is that these words and concepts, or words and ideas that we superimpose upon experience, are static. They're static. So I imagine all of you have had an opportunity by now to have some idea of the kind of person, and I'm not going to criticize anything here, I'm just offering this to see whether it corresponds to your experience. You may have some idea, you may have formed an opinion, or have some idea what kind of a person is Mr. Donald Trump. Name ring a bell? You know, anybody not heard of him? Anybody not have an opinion? You kind of like just, the jury's out? Could be, no, it looks like the opinion's okay. So there's no point, there's no need for me to express my opinion, who cares? But the suggestion here is this, that whatever comes to mind when you think of this individual, or if you see him on the television, internet, and so forth, how you lock him in, the grid of your conceptualization, static. Not to say that it can never change. It's just that while it's there, it's like a snapshot and not a movie. The name, of course, Donald Trump, that doesn't change at all, unless you want to go to Drumpf. John Oliver had a very good piece on that. So if you want to shift over to Donald Rumpf, this is always a possibility. I actually see the merit in doing that. But everybody else here, I think, probably would really prefer Trump. So there it is. But the name itself, of course, remains static. It's the same name. When he was a little kid, I mentioned they called him Donald Trump, and now he's no longer a kid. They still call him the same name. I presume he's not the same in all respects as he was when he was a little kid. But to watch this, joking aside, to watch how the appearances are never the same, but never the same. Similarities, of course, but the same? Does reality really replay itself? No, never does. The context is always different. And so the reality is always unprecedented, always changing. But that which we superimpose conceptually, static. Static. Which means one of those is realistic and the other one's not. Because nothing is static, and yet if our concepts and labels are static, then we know there's an incongruity, a disparity between what's happening and what we're imagining to happen. And so there it is. I just took an icon because he's made himself so famous. But in our personal relationships, relationship to spouses, children, friends, teachers, business colleagues, and so forth, what we carry around with us is going to be relatively static. The actual person is never static, not even when they're dead. They're still in a state of flux. And so distinguish between these two, because the general tendency is confusion, fusing together that which we superimposed and that's what's given, as if there's no difference, as if we're just witnessing all of it, as if that person really is as static as we imagine him or her to be. And that will give rise to a lot of suffering. Now, if that's true outwards, oh gee. How about our self-concepts? When people are suffering from low self-esteem, a sense of lack of self-worth and so forth, might that possibly be just a wee bit static? In contrast to the ever-changing flow of thoughts, emotions, desires, mental states, and so forth and so on. Or for people who are narcissistic, just the opposite, an inflated sense of their superiority, their outstanding qualities, and so forth. Is that not also static? And so it goes every which way. So the practice, really simple, and then we will begin. Really simple. Let's rest in the stillness, be wide open without moving, but observe what arises. Arises, arises, arises in these very sense fields. So your eyes could be at least a little bit open. Be aware of whatever's arising there from that stillness, and then note when the projections leap out and what they are. As much as possible from the perspective of stillness, see the projections going out, words, concepts superimposed, and observe, is this true or not, that the appearances are ever-changing and that which is superimposed, relatively static. Okay, let's go for it.